Hello there. Today I'm going to talk to you about an extremely important subject when learning any language, and especially English. That's how to learn vocabulary. First thing I want to talk about is knowing a word actively and passively. What does that mean? What's the difference? If we know a piece of vocabulary actively, it means we know it from Turkish or French into English, and from English into Turkish. However, if I am not able to use the word, but I can understand it from its context, this is what we call passive knowledge. Okay? We don't need to know every single word to be able to speak a language. You don't have to learn every single word you see actively. Okay? There are lots of words, especially in the English language, that we need to understand if we hear it on television, but we don't necessarily need to reproduce ourselves. This can be true for TOEFL and IELTS too. Sometimes we learn a word passively, and then because we use it so much, or we hear it so much, it becomes part of our active vocabulary. It can take time, and the more time you spend practicing English, the more your vocab will become active. Here are my top tips for how to learn vocabulary. The first thing you need to do is have a small notebook, an A6 notebook, okay? Or sometimes I use an application on my phone for writing notes. If I hear a new word, if I'm not sure of a word in Turkish but need to know it, I can write this down. I have somewhere to make notes, to think about the language, and later I can look it up. But more importantly, for my last Turkish lesson, I have 10, 15, 20 vocabulary items. Next time I'm on the metro, next time I'm waiting for a student, next time that I have 10 minutes to spare because my Turkish friend is always late, I can read through this vocabulary, I can test myself, I can refresh my memory. Okay? It's not the only way to learn vocabulary, you need to do some more, but it's a good way not to waste your time. Another method is overexposure. What does overexposure mean? It means you hear the word too much. So you hear it so much, you can't ignore the word anymore. You might not live in an English-speaking country, but you do have access to English materials, to English teachers on Cambly. There are always ways for new words to enter your vocabulary and put in your notebook. Find a hobby, find a passion, find a subject you want to learn about. I'll give you the opposite example. Here in Turkey, I don't have a car and I don't drive. So if you ask me any Turkish vocabulary relating to a car, I don't know it. It's not important for me and I don't use it. Maybe it's the same for you. If I bought a car, suddenly it becomes important. So prioritize your vocabulary learning to something you love or something you need. Going further into something you enjoy, enjoy learning the language. One of the things I do for all students is teach them how to say, how are you? So many students come to me and say, how are you? Fine, thank you, how are you? Technically, it's correct, but A, it's boring for me as a teacher. Also, it's not realistic. We say, what's up? How you doing? Ne yapıyorsun? Okay, these kind of things. The same in Turkish. Ne haber? So find some good words, find some things you enjoy, learn them. Call your friends and say, hey, I found a new word in English. When you're talking to your teachers, use these idioms even if they're not relevant. There are many times when I say to Turkish people, what does this word mean? Actually, I already know the meaning, but when they explain it, maybe they give me a different meaning, or it helps me remember, gives me a different context. Okay? Don't pretend or don't think that you know a word. Okay? We can always learn more and we can always try and use it in different contexts. So use the vocabulary as well as learning it. So I gave you some tips, but now I want to give you some techniques. Okay? It's all very well saying, okay, now I have my list of words. But how do you learn them? One thing I do in the beginning And this is very good for words with direct translations. Numbers, colors, okay? The next method is the association method. What does that mean? That means, while I see a word, okay, doesn't matter what the word is, it has no context, it has no meaning in a foreign language. So we need to give it some meaning. We need to give it, our brain, a way to remember this word. There are a few ways to do this. The first thing we can do is ask, what kind of word is this? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? And every time we think of a noun, we should imagine this word in a specific place. Let me give you an example. At home, for adjectives. Okay, so welcoming. And we think, ah, yeah, welcoming home. Blue. Think of something in your house that is blue. And suddenly you associate, you have a picture of your house and you know it's an adjective. It's just helping you learn. Why? Because in English we have thousands of words. And if you really want to be fluent, if you want to do TOEFL, IELTS, if you want to speak like a native speaker, you need a large vocabulary. So we need to find methods. Finally, the last thing we can do is to break up words. I'll give you an example from French. The French word for kirpe, hedgehog, is hérisson. So when I was a young man trying to learn French, I split the word into two. Hairy, sun in English, which helped me remember hérisson for hedgehog. So now every time I hear hérisson, I see the picture of a hairy son, a hairy boy, and it helps me remember. Actually, in the beginning, this is useful, and later it will become part of your vocabulary. You will forget these associations. Today, we discussed a lot of ways, a lot of tips and methods on how to learn vocabulary. I hope you enjoyed some of them. I hope you're able to use them. And also, bear in mind, when you learn vocabulary, it's an active task. It's something that you are trying to do. By listening to podcasts, by watching YouTube videos, you may hear new words, but you aren't necessarily learning them. How many of you paused this video and tried to learn new words from me? How many of you wrote down any words you didn't know? I'm guessing not many, and that's fine. Okay, this video is about teaching you techniques, but why not kill two birds with one stone? Why not do both of these things? If you're watching an educational video, write down new words and add them to your list.